Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fantasy Whiplash, brought to you by our good friends at State Farm, only right here on opensports.com. As always, I'm your host, Sid Rosenberg. Now, we're just about 11 weeks into the baseball season, and the good teams are likely starting to separate from the bad. But let's see if we can help them all out as we welcome Tom Herrera, fantasy editor for AOL's FanHouse, one of my favorite sites, to the show. Tommy, how are you this afternoon, buddy?
Absolutely. Doing great. Thank you for having me, Sid.
Good to have you on, Tom. Tom, a big fan of mine, by the way, from the FAN days up in Staten Island, New York, and an old friend of our executive producer, Jason Garcia, and he even admits that in public. Am I right, Tommy?
I don't know. Should I be ashamed of that?
No, he's a great guy and doing a terrific job for us here. So he's one of my good friends as well. Let's get right to it here, Tommy. Raul Ibanez was the center of attention last week with the whole blogger steroid fiasco. In fact, we spoke to Jared a couple of days ago right here, but there's been just one guy named Pujols outproducing him to this point. Should fantasy owners continue to ride the Ibanez wave or unload him for the highest value right now?
Yeah, I really wouldn't trust him going into the second half. You really want to take your chances with some guy who's 37 years old and putting up in a career year. Look, Ibanez has always been streaky in the past, and he's usually more of a second half player. This time he's doing over a larger stretch of games in the first half. But I really wouldn't stick with him at this point. If you want to take your chances and think he's going to hit 50, fine, but I wouldn't recommend it, and he's going to cool off at some point.
He's actually cooled down a little bit now. He's up to 22 home runs, having a great first half, but the last couple of weeks, he's cooled down just a bit. I tend to agree with you. Now, as for some cheap guys to target here, Tom, Maglio Ordonez, only 2 homers and 21 RBI so far this season after 3 straight seasons of 20-plus home runs and over 100 driven in. What about Mags Ordonez in Chicago?
You know, it's tough because everybody was dogging Big Papi, saying, oh, he's getting a little too old in the tooth, and here he goes. He's showing the power stroke again, and I think we're going to see some from Maglio as well. And, he's 35, but, this was a guy who hit 330 after the All-Star break last year, and I don't think he's lost his power completely. He's just getting off to a really slow start, more than we've been used to. And he's still showing good plate discipline. So I think, this is a guy, I've seen him dropped out there in some shallow leagues. You might be able to pick him off your waiver wire off a frustrated owner.
I think I said Ordonez in Chicago. He was in Chicago. Of course, he's in Detroit right now. Sorry, Mags. But we will go to Chicago right now, Tom. We talk about Giovanni Soto, the second-year catcher for the Chicago Cubs. Last year, Rookie of the Year, the big season in 2008. But a huge disappointment so far at Wrigley this year, hitting just .223 with just 3 homers and 16 knocked in. What about Soto for the Cubs?
I'm kicking myself in one league because I took Soto over Victor Martinez. But, I'm still high on Soto. I struggle with him to this point. People got to remember that he had that sore shoulder in April, and that really sapped his power. And now he's just starting to find his stroke a little bit. I think the power is going to soon to follow. Maybe we see him later June and going into July. He's one of the cheapest catchers out there right now. You can just grab him for a song, go out and get Soto.
Tommy Herrera from FanHouse joining us right here on Fantasy Whiplash, only on opensports.com. Aces, you'll be able to get some cheap right now. The guys that, not a lot of money here. John Lackey began the season, Tommy, on the DL with arm trouble, still working his way back, giving up lots of hits, but the strikeouts are there. 10 strikeouts in 7 innings in his last start against San Francisco. Nowhere to go but up for a guy that's usually pretty consistent. What about John Lackey with the Angels?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Lackey. He's a big bulldog, and you know what he's going to give you. Every year he's pretty consistent. He might not give you the kind of over 200 innings that you used to from some of these other inning leaders, but Lackey, you got to consider this kind of spring training for him coming back from that injury. He's still striking out. He's showing a good strikeout to walk ratio, which is what we like to see. And I think those hits will come down, and we'll start to see the Lackey we remember in the second half.
Talking about guys you remember, Brandon Webb has been one of the more consistent starters, Tommy, as you know, inside the NL the last couple of years. Went right to the DL with a bad shoulder after getting shellacked on opening day. Slated to throw off the mound on Friday. Still a few weeks away, but when he gets back, this guy's been terrific. Could have won 2 Cy Youngs. Brandon Webb in Arizona. What about him?
In the beginning of the year, we just saw a shoulder strain, and they've kept him on the DL a pretty long time, and I think Arizona's been really playing the cautious route with him. So when he does come back, I think we're going to see a pretty strong Webb. I don't think it'll take too long for him to get some of that rust off. They've been really cautious with him, so I think you should be confident. If you want to make a pitch for Webb, you should be able to get him really cheaply, and owner might not ask for much.
I was on radio station in New York just yesterday, Tommy, the Brandon Tierney Show on 1050 ESPN in New York. And he had former Met the Met pitching coach Rick Peterson on the day before I was on, and Johan Santana now has had 4 or 5 bad starts in a row. His ERA is about 8 over the last month, and you have to think this guy must be hurt because he's been so consistent his whole career. Peterson claims he's got a knee issue. Santana vehemently denied that yesterday, but again, how does a guy that's been so consistent year after year put together 4 or 5 bad starts in a row, including a 15-0 loss to the Yankees where he gave up 9 runs last Sunday? What do you think about Santana? Do you think he may be damaged goods?
No, I don't think that at all. And, with Peterson, there's a little mixed emotions going on there at the same time. But with Santana, people have to realize in the past, he hasn't gotten roughed up to this degree, but he has been pretty shaky in first halves before. Santana is notoriously a second-half pitcher, and anybody who's owned him before kind of realizes that. He's always stronger after the break. I think it's a mechanical issue, and I think we'll see him iron it out. I really think Johan would be honest if he was dealing with some kind of injury.
All right, Tom, now another ace on this shelf, Jake Peavy out in San Diego with the Padres. Had a chance to be dealt to the White Sox and decided not to. Now he's banged up. Hopefully fantasy owners were able to do what the Padres couldn't and trade him before he got hurt. But if you're stuck with Jake Peavy, what are some other options out there for Peavy owners?
Luckily there's a lot of guys out there on the waiver wire that people aren't really looking at, and 2 of them are actually in Oakland. Oakland's got this really great young pitching staff under the tutelage of Kurt Young, the pitching coach there. Vin Mazzaro, he's 2-1, got a 1.37 ERA, and you've also got Josh Altman, the lefty over there, with a 4-1 with a 3.43 ERA. Both those guys are available in a lot of leagues. You've also got Scott Baker. A lot of people have ignored this guy. A lot of people drafted him and then dumped him. But over his past few starts in June, he actually has a 23-2 strikeout to walk ratio. If that guy keeps his homers down, we're going to see the Scott Baker we remember that everybody drafted.
1 minute to go here, Tommy. Going back to New York, being they're up there right now in Manhattan. I asked you about Santana with the Mets. Chien-Mien 0-4, ERA just above 14, by the way. Been disastrous for the Yankees. Set to go Wednesday night against the Washington Nationals. He's in that starting rotation. Jabba Chamberlain remains in that starting rotation. Chien-Mien, he's been hurt a bit this year as well. Came back into the bullpen. Is this a guy you think that will regain the form that had him win 19 games 2 years in a row?
No, absolutely. Wong is such a tricky case because he's one of those 2-category guys. When he's completely healthy and on, he'll give you a pretty solid ERA and he'll give you wins, but he'll never give you the strikeouts. So if that guy's not winning ball games for you, you really can't afford to keep him around. Let someone else take a chance on him. What I do like is what Boston's got going. They've got that kid Clay Buchholz in the minors. If you're looking for minor leaguers to stash, they've got a roster dilemma. Clay Buchholz is pitching lights out down there. He's going to have to come up eventually.
This guy also pitched a no-hitter for the Red Sox a couple of years ago, Buchholz. So he's had some success at the Major League level. Okay, last one here. We do this each and every week, Tom. It's the OpenSports.com Fantasy Sleeper of the Week. Who's your guy?
You know what? I'd have to say, I think the guy on the Mets that I'm looking at is Gary Sheffield. One of the things that we've seen from Sheffield, he's not used to this kind of playing time. He's getting a little banged up, but we did see some power surge a few weeks ago, and I think we're going to see a little more out of Sheffield if they could keep him healthy. So that's my guy. Hey, someone's got to hit homers. I've been to Citi Field. It's rough over there, but if anybody can hit him out, it's Sheffield.
Yeah, it's amazing, the lack of home run production. 4 home runs, I think, for Wright. Sheffield's got maybe 6 or 7, but no Delgado in that lineup. Home runs hard to come by for the New York Mets. Tommy, terrific job here, buddy. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and let's do this again real soon, pal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've been great, Sid.
Thank you. You can catch all of Tom's work, by the way, at AOL FanHouse.com, which is a great site. Follow the whole crew at FanHouse at Twitter.com/FanHouse. That's going to do it for this edition of Fantasy Whiplash, brought to you by our good friends at State Farm. I'm Sid Rosenberg. Be sure to come back on Friday as we go down on the farm with MLB.com's Jonathan Mayo. Until then, enjoy the baseball. The future of sports on the web is open.